And I want to quickly go over the last couple parts on the Chickster. That way, if you get to the point of being done with the first part, you can obviously move on to the second part. Just like everything, the reason that we're even rigging this is to make our controls easier, make it easier to move the guy around. Last time we looked at this, we had controls for the leg there, and I made controls for the rotations of all these, so I finished up the other one by doing the same thing. The sucky thing about any rigging is you can't just like mirror things over, you have to redo the stuff. So even though I did the set driven on this hand or foot, I can't just flip it over to the other side. I can duplicate this control, and I get at least the names of the stuff so that the names are the same, and then I can just rename it here and then freeze the transforms. The other parts that we still have to cover is how to control the neck, and how to control the head, and then how to control these little like feathery type things on top. So the way that he is set up is he has this neck controller which allows him to rotate like so. And I can grab this one and rotate that joint, and then I have this one so I can rotate that joint. Okay? Now there's no one way that you will always rig something. It's always going to be just like a what's working best. Okay, so we'll go over that, and then also these feathers that are on top. I'm going to show you the easy way to rig it. This is the easy way to rig it. So basically, I have a slider that moves this back and forth. Oops. I'm also going to show the hard way to rig it, which is how I did the tail feathers. And then what's cool about the way the tail feathers are rigged is that they're automatic. So I don't have to worry about actually animating the tail. It's automatically animated. So when he moves left and right, whatever, the tail feathers would actually move left and right. More setup here, but less animation. Less setup here, but more animation. Okay? And then once you're done with this, you should have, your end product will be a video showing off the controls. Just like you had your Pokeball guy, you'll have a little video showing, here's all the controls of my character. So this isn't all of them, this is some of them. I didn't do the other leg because I'm teaching it, I don't have to. So there's him kind of looking around. He lifts his leg and then stomps it down. Okay, so the animation isn't super tweaked, it's good enough, right? We get the idea how all this stuff is moving around. You can see how the neck moves, how the eye moves, how the knee moves, and so on. When he comes up, I've actually given his legs a little bit of a movement too, so it's not just like static. One of the easiest things to do is to forget to move everything so that when like you're balancing on a leg, you don't just like stand on one leg, you're kind of like wobbling side to side a little bit. And so that's what he's doing. So his neck is moving, his eye is moving, his leg is moving, and so on. Also, when you blink, or when you turn a different direction with your eye, so when you look one way and then you look another way, there's always a blink in the middle of it. If you just had the eye like turn left or turn right, it actually looked really creepy. So you'll see every time he moves his eye from one side to the other that there's a blink in there. And then any blinks that I do, it's usually about a 5-frame blink. Okay, so like 2 frames it goes down, 1 frame or 3 frames it comes back up. And I even added a couple blinks right here just so it didn't look extra creepy again. All right, so let me go back to where we were before, the one that was not rigged with joints, I believe. All right, so there's where we left off last time. Okay, so I need to create a controller for the neck. So I'm going to create a NURBS circle. I'm going to rotate it like that. And I don't want the whole thing, I just want part of this. So I'm going to take the NURBS circle and use the sweep and just lower it until I get a nice little like radius, right? Something like that. And then I'm just going to bring this down into there. something like that. That seems like a good spot. All right. So I'm going to put the pivot probably, there's probably a good spot. I'll leave it there. Okay. I do need to parent this. So basically when the character moves forward, I want that control to move with it. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to shift click that and hit P to parent it. Then I'm going to give it a name. Neck controller. And I'm going to freeze the transforms on it, so now it's all nice and clean. Okay. So this control here, I want to be able to do separate, and this control here, I want to be able to do separate. That way, let's say that he looks down like this. I still want to be able to take these two joints and make him look up. Okay? So all the other joints that are inside this area, right there, all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these, those will all be controlled from the same controller. These two will be controlled using separate controllers. You could go through and actually create a controller for each one of those if you wanted to. You don't have to, that's just extra work. So in doing this, I found out that my joints were not set up the exact way that I would want them. So if you look at the red, blue, and green, if I grab my blue and rotate it like this, and then I grab the joint and I rotate it like that, those are both Z. So those match. So as I rotate the curve forward, the joints would go forward. As I rotate this in the red direction, and I take this and rotate this in the red direction, they're two totally different things. Okay? So I could try to fight this. I could go through and try to reorient all the joints, but I don't need to. How I'm going to rig this, I don't need to worry about any of that. So I'm going to go into my spine here. I'm going to go to my rotates, and I'm going to go to an expression. Bless you. And all I want to do is just connect the rotation from here to there. So I'm going to say spine 1 dot rotate X. You can write it like this. Okay, all lowercase rotate and then capital X. Or I can simply put RX. That's the same exact thing to Maya. That will equal the neck controller, same exact way that I spelled it before, dot rotate X. Okay. Now there's 3 controls, X, Y, and Z, so I need to do all 3 of those, X, Y, and Z. So I put a semicolon, I copy this, and then I paste it. So this will be, let's say, Y, this will be Z, this will be Y, this will be Z. Okay, so here's going to be the problem, just so you can see it, because I haven't fixed the problem yet, I've just connected it. So Z works. As I drag this back and forth, he rotates back and forth. As I grab the red and rotate, he turns left. That is not intuitive. As I grab the green and rotate, he tilts left. Okay, again, not intuitive. So my red and my green, my X and my Y are swapped. So I need to go to my expression and swap them back. So I'm going to go to my expression, and instead of the rotate Y equaling Y and the rotate X equaling X, I'm just going to swap them. So this will equal Y, and this will equal X. Oops. Okay, so now if I look at this and I rotate it, now that rotates him that direction, and that rotates him the opposite direction. Okay, so we're getting closer. So now what I have to do is take that rotate X and just make it negative. And we looked at that last time of just making it negative. Rotate X times negative 1. Oops, there we go. So now, let's try this again. No. Oops, that's the wrong one, sorry. I had to put it on the other controller. There we go. So now that's working. And this way, and that way. Okay.
Can we see the code again?
Yep, I'm going to pull it up. So instead of it being on the X, which is where I put it last time, I put it down here. So multiplying the rotate y times -1, I had to multiply the x times -1. Okay? So now, this is what's great about expressions, because if I did a set driven, I'd basically have to load in each one of these things again and set driven each one of those things again. With this, I can just copy it and paste it and then just change the name. So this will be spine 2, spine 2, spine 2. And then paste it again, paste it again, paste it again. So I would have one for spine 3, so there'd be spine 3. And if you get more into expressions, some people like doing coding stuff, believe it or not. And they'll actually write more advanced expressions. When we look at characters, you'll see some of them are basically just like pages of expressions that make their entire thing work correctly. There we go. So now, if we watch this, I rotate this, he looks down, I rotate that, he looks up, and that way, and then that way. So it's much more intuitive now than it was before. Now, just as a bonus piece of information, originally I tried to do this using a parent constraint. Not a parent constraint. Yeah, it was. I tried to use parent constraints for this, or orient constraints, and it didn't work. When I did it to the first one would work, but all the other ones didn't work. So, whatever. So expressions are great for that. Now, looking at our very first assignment or second assignment, which was a stick, we know that all things are not going to rotate equally all the time. When I rotate my back, every single one of my vertebrae does not rotate equally. The most happens at the base, and then less and less and less go down. Maybe not exactly, but good enough for us. So spine number 1, which is our very first one, maybe this one should rotate the most. And then spine number 2, maybe that one should rotate the second most, and then the third, and then the fourth, and then the fifth, okay? So I'm going to start here. Spine 5, I'm actually going to multiply each one of these values times 0.9. Okay, now even though I multiplied this one times -1 already, I'll still multiply it times 0.9. This one I'm going to leave alone, so that's just going to be whatever the same value is. This one I'm going to multiply times 1.1. I can just copy that. This one I'm going to multiply times 1.3. And what this is going to do is it's going to give each one of my joints a little offset. So basically, they won't all rotate the exact same amount. There we go. So spine 1 will rotate the most, spine 2 the second, third, fourth, and fifth. So now when I rotate this, you'll see it looks pretty much the same, but it's not, okay? It's a subtle difference, and you'll see some of these subtle differences are what's going to make an animation go from meh to really good. Oops, back up. Okay, sweet. So I'm happy with the way that looks. You could also, just for another bit of information, you could also add more controllers inside here, and that multiplier for each one of those I could control outside of that. I could even have controllers for each individual joint plus the expression happening, and then, you know, everything would work together. Cool. So the neck part is done. Now I'm going to go to my sphere, and I need to create a controller for this, so I just want to show you how I would create a controller for, let's say, the head. Okay, just another way that you can use stuff inside Maya to create controllers. So I'm going to lower the resolution on this to maybe like 6 and 6. That works. I'm going to delete, come on, the faces on here. And I'll delete that and that. There we go. So basically I have one for the front of the head, one for the back of the head. That's what those two are for. I need to separate them, so I go to Mesh, Separate. Now they're two separate objects. And then I can delete the history. And now they, again, are two separate objects. Okay. I'm going to parent them. Now I have to keep in mind how I want them to move. So if I were to take this and rotate this down like that, do I want the head to also, or do I want these controls to also move with it? Most likely I do. Most likely I want those controls to move with the neck as it rotates. So I'm going to take both of these, and I can't parent it to this one because that one's going to be controlled by that. I can't parent it to this one because that one would be controlled by it. So I'm going to parent this joint or this block to this one. And I'm going to parent this one to that one. Basically, whatever something is controlling, you parent it to the thing above it. Okay? So this block is going to be controlling this joint. So he gets parented to that joint. This block is going to be controlling that joint, so he gets parented to the joint above it. Okay? And that would be true for even this. This one's last joint that it's controlling is this thing, so he could have got parented just as easily to this, and it would have worked the same way. Okay? So now that I have that, if I render this, and I have a light in the scene, which I don't at the moment. There it is. You'll see that obviously we get these two planes in here. We can do a couple things. One thing is we can make a layer, put all the controls on a layer, make the layer invisible at render time. That's a possibility to do. It's annoying, but it's a possibility. If we go to the attribute editor, we can set up some other stuff. So under Arnold, we can tell it that we do not want this item to have primary visibility, cast shadows, diffuse reflections, any of this stuff. So if I turn off all of these, it will not render that item. So now when I go back to render, you'll see, when I hit play, there we go, that item is gone. Okay, so I'll do the same thing to the other one. Okay, now that's gone. Now I may not want it to be a solid object. Okay, I want this thing to be here, but somebody coming new into my scene may not realize what this is, and I can't see where the eye is because this plane is in front of him. So if I click on that under the display, object display, under drawing overrides, I can enable an override. I can make this a shaded off, there we go. Same thing here, enable override, shaded off. So now it's basically a wireframe box. So now it's a bit more obvious as to what this is. And I haven't used this before. Maybe I can change the color? No. I forget how I did that before. Maybe just a layer is what I did. If I do put it on a layer and then I double click it, I think I can change the color with this. Nope. Well, it's not terribly important, it's just curious. All right. All right, so now I just need to control the rotation of this first joint with that. Before I do it, freeze transform. We always want to freeze the transform before we control anything so that it's back to being basically just reset. We want to rename this, so this will be neck rotation. This will be head rotation. So we can do a couple things. We can take this and I can shift click that. I can go to constrain. I can go to orient. Keep maintain offset on. And now that works. There we go. And then do the same thing with this one. Shift click that joint, constrain, orient. Yep. So everything works. Perfect. Okay. Now, if I wanted to, I could have also done the expression. That's another possibility. I could have added a multiplier in there. I could have done multiple things. Okay. As you're going through the video and you're looking at how I'm doing these things, like rigging the spine and rigging this, you have the option of how you want to rig it. If you want to do set driven, do set driven. If you want to do expressions or connection editor or something else, do those things. You don't have to stick with how I'm doing them. As long as they have the same functionality where I can grab an item and move it pretty quickly and then be able to manipulate the controls, that's what I'm after. Okay? Cool, so that's those pieces. Now I need to create the feather animation. So I'm going to grab the points here, and then I'm going to use shift greater than to go up the chain. And those are all the points that might be animated for that little feathery wag thing. So under deform, nonlinear, there's a bend. And I'm just going to move this kind of in position. And what I want to do is line up the center with where it's going to bend from. So if these were my fingers, that line would be basically like right in the center of this, lining up with the direction of my fingers. I go to the bend, I go to curvature, and then I can middle drag. Now, it's going the wrong direction, so I need to rotate it this way also. There we go. Okay. Now it's also, if I go to wireframe, it's rotating from the bottom and the top. I only want to rotate from one direction, so I turn one of these two off. Typically it's going to be the low bound, but it really depends on how you rotated your stuff. So now I have a very easy control of how I can rotate these things, okay, or bend those. Now this has to be parented to something. As I move it, it stays there. So this will be parented to this joint works. Okay. And then the control for this bend, this curvature, I would probably throw on top of something like this. So this item here that is responsible for that item, I would probably have a slider here that just controls curvature. I'm not going to show that. I've shown how to connect things. You can figure that out. So you could do the same thing for the tail feathers as well. It's the same process. Make a little bend handle with the points, and then there you go. If you want to do it a bit fancier, this is, I think, even just a funner way to do it. I'm going to create a curve. So I'll show you the theory behind this before we get into actually creating it. So here's a curve. I'm going to go to N hair, and I'm going to make this curve dynamic. Make selected curve dynamic. Cool. So now what happens when I hit play? Woo, it goes really quick and then freaks out. Hold on. There we go. It's hard to see right there. Okay. It moves slightly, just a hair shorter. If I go into this curve here, and somewhere in the attribute editor there's a follicle, and I turn off the point lock right here, and I say just the base is point locked. So wherever I clicked first, that's the base. That's going to be locked in. So just like hairs on your head, the end of your hair is typically like wavy in the air, and then the base is not. So we rewind again, we hit play, and then it falls down. Okay? So now the idea with this is that I want to use that curve to control the movement of the tail feather, okay? And I want to have one curve per tail feather. So imagine if I have this set up correctly, I could have 5, 10, or 20 of these curves all controlling that thing. That's the idea. We'll see how well I can implement that. Oops. So I'm going to go to my front view. What? I don't know why that's happening. That is peculiar. I'll have to look into that. Just for fun, let me see if I think I know what it is real quick. I think it might be coming from my blink. Nope, I don't know where it's coming from. Well, that'll just be a fun thing to look out afterwards. Did I have it on here? No. Another fun fact, window node editor, and you click this, and then you go out and start drinking. This is everything that's happened to that surface, okay? So every single thing we've done to it is connected somehow. We don't need to worry about how things are connected or what's connected. all I'm doing is looking for something that doesn't belong here. Something that may not belong here is, let's say I saw bend handle 2, 3, or 4. I know I've only put 1 on there. So I know there's bend handle 1, which is right there. That's fine. There's a blend shape that's right there. I don't see anything weird. I don't know where that's coming from. Well, it's unimportant at the moment, I guess. But it's just weird that I'm rewinding it and it's sometimes bouncing back and sometimes not. All right, so I need to create a curve for each one of these. So I go to CV curve. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a curve basically like in the center of this. And I'm trying to hit it right at about each one of those points. So there's a point here, point there, and so on. I'm hitting each one of those. When I'm done with one, I hit Y, and then I go on to the next one. Okay, so I'm just drawing right in the middle. Don't worry about what the curve looks like. Just kind of start and then draw it right in the middle. And then when you get fully done, you hit enter. There we go. Oh, see, it's definitely off because now that's like off to the side. This might be some carryover from maybe when I did this before and was playing around. Whoops. All right. So we have these curves that are in here. So I'm going to do the same thing I did. I'm going to grab all 3 curves, and I'm going to make them dynamic. So under FX, under Nhair, I go to make selected curve dynamic. There's no options. This is just default. Okay. So now they're all dynamic. I hit play. They fall down. Just ignore that. That keeps popping. I'm not sure what that is. So we get a couple things. I need to go into my follicle for each one of these. So if I go into my outliner, you'll see there's follicle 1, 2, and 3. So I'm going to go into each one manually and turn off the point lock to just base. Follicle 2, base, follicle 3, base. Okay, now we rewind again, we hit play, and now they droop down. There they go. Okay. Now, what we don't want them to do is droop down and like intersect each other, because obviously the feathers should not do that. So if I go to the any one of them and I go to the attribute editor, I'm going to go to the hair system. Whenever you do make this selected curve dynamic, it creates a hair system and a nucleus. Here's the hair system, here's the nucleus, and then some other stuff. So on the hair system, I'm going to go to collisions, and I'm going to say solver display self-collision thickness. And what this does is it shows you the size that they're colliding with. So you can't view this for some reason. See, it's not even updating now, is it? Collision thickness, no, self-collision. Oh, I didn't turn it on. There we go. So now I have self-collision thickness on. I hit play, and they're not really colliding with each other, okay? So I'm going to go and take their self-collide with scale up to a crazy amount, like 10 or 50 or 75 or 100. There we go. Now the idea with the size of this is it should be about the size of each one of those feathers. So if one of the feathers is about that big, then that would work. So now when I hit play, you'll see how they don't collide with each other anymore, or they don't intersect each other. They're actually like stacked on top of each other. So this you could actually use for a lot of things. I've seen like a bridge, like if you ever seen Shrek and him and Donkey are on the bridge, you could use the hair system to actually control the boards on the bridge, okay, or the ropes. So that's awesome. That's working. I'm going to grab this again apparently because this wants to do this. If I do that, it seems like it resets it. So it might have something to do with that bend. I'm not 100% sure. I'm just going to delete the bend for now. Maybe that's what I'll do. There we go. Yep. So I rewind now. So I must have grabbed something when I did that. All right. So now I hit play. You see they stack. Perfect. Cool. So now what I need to do is I need to take the curves and have the curves control the surface. Okay. So all we've done so far is the surface is moved or the surface, the curves are just colliding. That's all that's happening. So output curves. So I need to find which curves are moving. So these output curves right here, that's what's actually moving with this. There's another set of curves right inside here. Those are like my original curves. So Maya remembers, like, here's the original curve you made. Here's the one that's actually dynamic. So don't touch those, just leave them. I need to know where these ones are. Okay? So I'm going to click on my surface. I'm going to go to my deform menu, and I'm going to say wire tool right here. And the way the wire tool works is you can read the stuff down here, but the first step is click the surface that's going to be deformed. My Chickster will be deformed. Then I hit enter. Now I pick the items that will be my control curves. I grab these ones and then hit enter. So now if we hit play, you'll see how now those curves are controlling the tail feathers. Okay? Now it's not an incredibly long setup. I had to do some explaining obviously, but it is a very effective setup. And if I had 50 of these or 100 of these, that process is just that much quicker and that much more fun to even just utilize. Sweet. Now, I have to get this to move, okay? Just like we did this, where this rotates and all these controls go with it. If I were to grab this and move it, those tail feathers don't go with it, and it would actually probably not like it. Yep, it doesn't do anything, see? So I need those to move with it. Now, just like your hair, in order for your hair to move, the follicles for the hair move, and the follicles are part of your head. So I'm going to take the follicles here, and I'm going to shift-click this little dot there, that joint, and then parent it to it. Okay, so now when I hit play, we still get the same animation, which is something you always want to check. And now if I move it, they'll go with it. Okay, now you'll notice that once it's moved, though, they actually stop interacting with it. So when it's back here at the beginning, and then I hit play, it works. The second that these move, and then I hit play, whoa, they freaked out a little bit. Those still work, but they're not controlling that surface, okay? So this goes to how the wire works. So the wire, when we create it, we have these three curves that are our default curves. Just like Maya remembers, here's what your original hair curves were. It remembers the original curves for the wire. So I'm going to take these grayed out ones, which are the base, and I'm going to shift click that joint, and I'm going to hit P to parent it. So now the base curves will also go with it. So now when I hit play, that works. When I move it, and I'm just going to test this out by just setting some rotational keyframes. And we can probably turn off the collision thickness there. There we go. So now we actually get movement on these. And I haven't had to set any keyframes as far as the tail goes. All I've done is rotated the body. So if this is something that is moving throughout the streets, it's running, it's jumping, it's doing whatever, I've saved myself hours of time because I don't have to go back and manually animate the tail moving every time he runs or jumps or whatever. I also can control the hairs through the hair system. I can control under dynamic properties. Here's the stretch resistance, the compression, and the bend. So if I hit play now, you'll see they're a lot more stiff and rigid than they were a second ago. If I pull these all the way off, they just sink down to nothingness. Oh my God, this is gross. All right, so they probably need something in there, right? 0.15, maybe even. There we go. Now there's also some dynamic properties on here like, sorry, it's under my nucleus, like gravity. So if I increase my gravity, let's say to 50, you'll see how it pulls them down even further. Okay. There's also wind, so let's just pretend that for a second there was no animation on here. And then I grabbed the nucleus again, and I went to put the gravity back to where it was. and I went to wind speed, and I just cranked this up. Negative 500. That way it'll go backwards. So this is going to be a lot, but we'll see. Oh, it's crazy, right? Let's take some wind noise on here too. And there we go. So now we're getting some other interaction. So if we had those top ones and the wind was blowing, he was facing a certain way, we would still get some sort of secondary movement on him just based on the dynamics. When you use anything dynamic, end hair, new cloth, any of that stuff, it's all dynamic based. You have to rewind it to the beginning every time, then hit play, and then let it do its thing. If you try to click and drag and see that animation, you'll see how it's not working correctly. Okay, so that's one of the drawbacks of it. All right, so you don't have to use that thing. I showed it because I think it's cool. I think that's like an awesome way to rig something to get that to work. Once you're done, you'll have, like I said, oops, that's not the one I wanted. I wanted animation. You'll have a rigged Chickster dude who's ready to go. Let me take him for a second and hide him and then bring back this one. There he is. So there's all the controls that I need for this one. I hit play. And there he is moving around. It's incredibly quick, right? All right. So let's pretend that you've done your little animation on him. For the texture for this guy, I did a AI standard surface, which is what we've always done, except I went to the presets and I chose skin from the list. So skin is a subsurface material. So if you look at the rendering that I did, that's not there. Right here. You'll see there's variations, like where his skin is thinner, it's this color. Where it's thicker, it's this other color. Okay, especially like up here, you'll get some different variations as well. So you can definitely play with that. You'll see that there's no actual base color. This is set to 0. There's no reflections or metalness. There's a little bit of specularity. Everything else is under subsurface. So here's my 2 colors. And then I played with the scale just to tweak it a bit. Okay, so that's all I did for that. For the light, I have a single light here. I have a backdrop sky. And I think I just used color temperature, and then that was it. Okay, now I did run into a weird thing that was happening with this one, is that when I would render this out, it would get to the part where he lifted his leg, and for whatever reason, it would just kill. The rendering would stop. And I played with it for like 40 minutes, and then I said, well, I don't know why it's doing it. I'm just going to find a workaround. So right there, it would just stop rendering. It would render, but it would be blank pages, okay? So there is a way that we can do this. And this is how you should typically work on your stuff if you have anything dynamic, is I need to export out basically a baked version of this character so that I could then use him to do this kind of animation, okay? That way, it's no longer calculating. It's basically just already like baked in animation that just works. So if I go to Arnold and I go to stand-in and I say export, you will find the world's greatest file format in here. These are AS exports. So Arnold allows you to export files out that are called AS files, right? Apparently I'm the one that finds that hilarious. I'm waiting years for that. All right, so I need to make sure that, sequence is clicked. I need to make sure it starts at the start, ends at the end. I could change the step. I do want my shaders to go with it, so I will export my shaders out as well. There's no cameras, lights, anything. I just have to make sure that I've picked on the eye and the Chickster. Those are the only 2 actual items that are going to be exporting out of this. And then I say export, and then I put this into a location, test. Don't put a number here. I put a number before or an underscore, and it didn't like that. So just give it a straight name and then say export. And what it's going to do is it's going to go through my animation, and basically everything that happens to my character, they're going to bake into these files. Then we can read these files in, and then they're like locked into place. And what's awesome about that is that if we wanted to duplicate him, very easily we could duplicate that thing because it's basically just a flattened out version of my bird's animation. So if you think of like a video game, the character walks, he jumps, he runs, he skips, he whatever, those animations are all baked in. And so we can take this bird, we can have a million of these chicksters all over the place doing whatever without having to do anything fancy. If I duplicate this right now and I scoot that over, well, number one, that didn't work at all. But I just hit play, you'll see that it just doesn't do anything. Like, one of them stands still, his eye is like way over here. It doesn't work. Okay. So once you get your ass out of Nuke, or out of Maya, then you need to bring it back in. So I grabbed all of my objects, curves, everything that wasn't a ground, sky, or a light, or a camera, and I threw them on a layer just to hide them. Okay, now I need to bring that back in, so I went to Arnold, Stand In, Create. And then all I have to do is find that bird. So there he is. And I rewind. Come on. Oh, use bounding box. Nope, use shaded. There we go. Okay. And then if I hit 6, it doesn't display the texture, but then when I do the render view, it does show up in the render view. Okay, so you won't see the texture here, but you will see it when you render out. So this is basically like a locked-in version of my bird. If I duplicate it, now I have 2 locked-in versions of my bird. If I play the animation, nothing happens. Okay? It has a sequence that's loaded, but it doesn't know to update the sequence. So on the frame right here, I'm just going to right-click, make an expression, and then just say that the frame number is equal to the frame. So basically when it's at frame 1, it loads frame 1. When it's at frame 2, it loads frame 2. Okay? So now when I scrub through, you'll see the animation play out. And because there's no dynamics on this, I can click and drag in the timeline because it's all just baked in stuff. And you'll see it actually plays back even a bit quicker. I can delete that one. I can duplicate this one. Make this frame number equal to frame as well. Oops. Okay, so they're doing the same exact thing, but then I can go to frame offset. And now one of them will do it 10 frames later. Like he's watching them. How do you do that?
So how would you create 100 of them?
100 of them?
Variety.
Inside of Mash, which is a dynamics engine. I'll keep that guy there. Yes. What? Oh. I could do 2 things. One, I thought I could use Mash with this. Apparently you can't use Mash with it because it's Arnold, whatever. There'd be another way that we export it out. The other thing I could do is I could actually make basically a little script that would actually go through and duplicate and offset each one of these things. Okay? Or I can go here to duplicate this. My pivot's on the bottom, yes. So let's say I duplicate, let's say 100 copies of this. I'm going to offset it in the Z direction, like 20 units. And I'm going to say duplicate input graph. I believe graph. We'll find out. It did not duplicate them the way I thought it would. Let's try that again. Edit, duplicate special. copy instance. All right, well, I guess I have to do that one at a time. So I'd copy this one over here, and I would set this to, let's say, 23. Whoops. Oops. And then I would hit dang it, G to redo that again. And that one's offset to 55. And then G to redo it again, and then this one is 5. And then I could also scale them down. There we go. So now you can see how they're all separate items. Okay. Now the other way that you could export it out so that you would work the other way, delete these, let me bring that guy back. And the Arnold files are good for Maya because they're Arnold files. If I'm going out to something else, obviously MASH doesn't like Arnold files too. I would export my selection as an FBX and make sure I include all the appropriate things. So FBX export, yes. This should bring open another box, there we go. I want my animation. I want the animation baked from 1 to 200. Lights, cameras, yes, yes, yes. That should be good. Test, Chickster. Yep, that's fine. All right, so I'm going to hide that, and then I will import that FBX. Now the cool thing about an FBX is that we don't get one file per frame. It's all baked inside of one. And you'll see the file size is actually a bit smaller. Hopefully everything worked. That seems like really small. Nope, where'd it go? Let's try that again. Import. I didn't like that export. Let's try that again. This is the fun of Maya, right? Export selection, FBX. I'm going to choose a different format. So 2016, 17 had some issues. It would export sometimes, other times it didn't work. So I'm going to export it as 2014, 15. Verify that I have my other stuff set up. Yes. Yes. Deformed models. Maybe I forgot to do that. Yep, I probably did. Let's try that again. Yes. All right, let's try again and see if it did. A little bit bigger. Nope. Still doesn't want to come in. I will prove to you that it does work. Because last semester I made an animation showing that it worked. Chicken grinder. All right, first you can see the original. And now I remember what I did. Haha. All right. So FBX is one way you can export stuff out. This was the way I did it, Alembic, which is, again, another way, depending on where you're going with the stuff. So time slider, yes. Everything else should be good. UV right. All right, export all. Chickster, export. All right. Now I go back to cache, Alembic, import. Chickster export again. And that I should be able to delete. Oops. I can't delete that because it deletes the eye. But there's my animation locked in. So now this one, because I have it on here, there, I'm going to group those together. Yes, I'm going to go to my mesh, create a mesh network. There we go. Now they're working. I'm going to use Z. Paint placer, that's what it's called. So I'm just going to set that back to 1. I'm going to use placer. And then this, basically, I can just add. Okay. Brush spacing, I'm going to turn that up. Not enough. There we go. Now, what's cool about this is that, oops, I could also go in here and change things like, oops, rotation mode, align to brush. There it is, random rotations. I can say rotate randomly in the Y direction 360 degrees. And then randomly scale each one that much. Oh, sorry, this is a range. I forgot that's a range. So 0.2 to, let's say, 2. There we go. And you see how they're all doing the exact same thing. I can take this group and I can duplicate it several times. And on one of these things, I should be able to offset it. Oh no, I have to, when I import it, I have to tell it I want to offset it, otherwise it doesn't offset it. No, it doesn't. Let's try that again. This, duplicate, close, turn that on so we can see it. Maybe it was. Let me try that again. Import. Yeah, set current time to start frame. So now when I import this Chickster, I have don't need these. There it is. So now when I play, no, it should be offset. There it is. Why didn't that one have it? Oh, I was grabbing the original one. That's why that didn't work. Here we go. So I can just offset this 10 frames. Perfect. So now I have group 2 and I have group 1. And now I can just drop group 2 into this thing. And then when I grab my placer and I say add, oops, it's randomly placing the 2 items in there. So I should get a little bit of variety inside that. And then I would just have to have more of those inside of my path in order to create those. And then you could also, what's neat about this is that once you have it set up on one in the group, you could actually change colors and really create a whole variety of them. When they do stuff like Hollywood movie type stuff, they do that, but they're writing scripts that drive all of this kind of thing. So all the color randomization, all the scaling, all that other stuff is all done for them. They're basically putting dots on a plane and saying, now go, and it automatically will populate each one of those things. We are not that fancy. And what is neat too, like if I take the ground here, and let me make a different ground because that one's not good enough. I'll make a sphere. There we go. I'm gonna go back to my mesh. This whole scene is like totally screwed up now. So much junk in here. There we go. Go back to my placer, go back to my add. You'll see how it even adds them like on that direction. Which is super awesome. And then I guess